Welcome to the Iona-Hoops.com podcast with your host, Kyle Franko.
It's season 2, episode 21 of the Iona-Hoops.com podcast, and March is in the air as Iona Gales are perhaps elevating their game just in time. We'll recap the latest victory over Fairfield, and we'll look ahead to next weekend's action against Canisius and Rider. And for the latter, we're going to welcome Kyle Franko from the Trentonian to talk Rider and MAAC hoops with us as we gear up for the home stretch. And as we get ready to do that, there's a lot of stuff to think about, and we'll cover them all in the Iona Iotas.
Iotas.
As we work toward late February, here's a look at the current MAAC standings. Iona has already clinched a first-round bye, meaning no pig game, and the Gales can actually clinch first place with a Siena loss at Monmouth on Tuesday, coupled with an Iona win over Canisius on Friday. Of course, a first-place finish means the number 1 seed Atlantic City, which gives you that extra day off between the quarterfinals and the semis, and though we don't want to go here, it does guarantee you a berth in the NIT should Iona fall in Atlantic City. Anyway, the rest of things is, well, a jumbled mess. Though nothing is clinched yet, it certainly appears like Siena, St. Peter's, and Monmouth will also soon be clear of the pig. And right now, Canisius seems to be settling into that 11th seed, though things change for sure in this league, so won't worry yet. But the next couple of weeks are going to be fun. If you like tiebreakers, paging Jaden Daly, as the battle for that 5th bye still includes 6 teams right now, and down the stretch they come.
Iotas.
Tickets for the MAAC tournament in Atlantic City are on sale now through icgalestickets.com. Their tourney is March 8th through 12th, and full brackets will be available once the MAAC regular season concludes the weekend before the tourney. Getting ticks through Iona's gets you seats in Iona's fan section, as well as access to complimentary pregame receptions where you get to schmooze with people like me, and there are other giveaways as well. Lots of good hotel options as well to explore if you're looking to make a week of it, as I am. Caesars and Tropicana are both great options. I've stayed at Caesars many times. Great gelato. I am actually staying at the Trop this time around. So for anybody there who wants to see somebody be awful at blackjack, there's the place to be. Anyway, check out icgalestickets.com and join me and other Iona lunatics in Atlantic City as we go for our 6th straight championship. Sorry, Siena fans.
Iotas.
Everyone is still asking me, Guy, what seed will we be if Iona wins out? Guy, does Iona still have a chance for an at-large? Guy, how's that keto diet going? Well, as we discussed in past episodes, there are a lot of tools to watch to get a feel for where Iona lands in the grand scheme of things. One, the bracket matrix clearly indicates right now that the Gales would be a pretty safe bet for a 12 seed if they win their final 4 regular season games and then win the MAAC tournament. And Bart Torvik's team sheet data, shown here, also seems to support a 12 seed for the Gales in that scenario. If Iona were to lose a game before winning the tournament, a 13 seed would be likely based on these metrics. But what if the unthinkable happens? We win these 4 games and then lose in Atlantic City. I've been telling you that our at-large hopes are pretty slim, extremely slim, in fact, and that really hasn't changed. But the quality of the bubble will be something to watch as we get closer to that point. And as long as we have some metrics that show us in a decent light, compared with your typical bubble teams from a major conference that have got a sub-500 league record and did little of note when playing those quad 1 and 2 games, there's hope. And look closely at those 3 columns toward the left here that are shown, the ones in the light green. Those are known as resume metrics, and the green shows our resume quality is actually very good compared with many others. Note all the red around us. So again, the glimmer of hope is still there. But I think we can all agree that we'd rather win these last 4 games and then cut down the nets in Boardwalk Hall and leave nothing to chance and take that 12 seed and go to work in the dance.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Andrew Slater was back with more Iona recruiting news recently with this tweet a week or so ago noting that 2022 point guard Jordan Pope of Prolific Prep is planning on visiting Iona. Just one catch, though. I poked all around the web and could not actually confirm that we've offered him, though I will note that I did find evidence that many of those other schools noted have offers out to the 6-foot Pope. So I guess this is a wait and see on whether this player is truly interested in our Gales and whether we're actually interested in him as well. Stay tuned. Last month, our Gales found themselves in an absolute war with the Fairfield Stags. Jake Wojcik went bonkers from 3, and the Stags really had a high performance outing against Iona, but a late Gale surge was enough to escape with the win back then. And here we were again with the Stags after about 20 minutes yesterday, this time in a defensive slugfest, and Fairfield leading 29-27 with about a minute and a half to go in the opening stanza. Osborne Shima then set the tone for the whole rest of the game. He made a strong move to the basket for 2. They made a steal and went coast to coast for a dunk. And suddenly Iona had momentum with the 2-point lead going into the locker room. Little did anyone know at that time that little Shima spurt would trigger a 14-0 Iona run to start the second half. And that lead would swell to as many as 25 as the Gales cruised to the 76-58 win. The Stags finished at 36% from the field, but for the better part of the second half, they were hovering more at around 31% for the game. Meanwhile, Iona hit on 61% of its shots in the second half, shot 51% for the game, and was even 8 of 18 for 44% from 3 in this one. Tremendous balance for the Gales this one, as Nelly led the way with 15, 10, and 3, and Joyner was the only other double-digit scorer for the Gales with 10 points, and he had 4 assists. Jolly completely across the board, 9, 5, and 5. We were all caught off guard at the opening tip as Josh Duwash got the start over Barrett Jean-Louis, and Duwash performed well in 16 minutes of action, pretty much concluding things with a 3 that I thought was going to hit the rafters or something before it came down and went into the net. But yeah, he performed well in limited time, so a great job by Josh. When you're Iona and you've already got your eye on a big march starting in Atlantic City, how do you get up to play the last place team in your conference on your home floor? That's the challenge Rick Pitino has in this one, as the Canisius Golden Griffins come visit this Friday. Maybe the best approach is just to show them tape of the second half of the game in Buffalo. If you recall, Iona was pounding the Griffs at the half, but Canisius, credit to them and their pride, just outplayed Iona in the second half of that one, and even made things a little too close to comfort later on, as that poor half triggered a 2-game losing streak for the Gales. The Griffs are not a good team, and on top of that, they're 0-14 on the road this season, and Iona is going to be huge favorites this one, more than 2 touchdowns for sure. And if the Fairfield game was any indication, Pitino may try to get guys like Duwash and Wilde a bit more run early on. But this is a game where you don't want to get silly. You need to jump on them early and stay on them, and then you can experiment later on all you want. Let's see how it all plays out. Okay, I know. I had Rider pegged much, much higher in the standings than where they are now. But for a little bit there, the Bronx were starting to look like the team I'd expected. I think they ran off 4 straight wins, and then they had that epic collapse very late against Siena, just a silly, stupid turnover, and that triggered Siena to get out of the Bronx Zoo with a win. And with that, Rider went back into the doldrums. I don't think they've won since. But they are at home, where they've played a bit better, and up until the St. Peter's game, Iona's road performances in MAAC play had been less than stellar. So this is one of those take-care-of-business moments for the Gales. They're the better team, clearly, but Rider's also clearly good enough and talented enough to cause trouble here if Iona doesn't come to play. And with that, it's time to bring in Kyle Franko from the Trentonian to take a closer look at the Bronx. We are thrilled to welcome back Kyle Franko to our podcast. He has been with the Trentonian for 11 years, covering Rider all of that time. Now is mixed in Princeton just for fun. Kyle, welcome back, man.
Well, Guy, thanks for having me. Always happy to come on and chat MAAC basketball.
Oh yeah, and this is the fun time. So I'm glad we got to hold you to this point of the year here, where it's starting to get to that stretch run. But before we get to that, we share something in common. We both expected Ryder to be pretty good this year. I had them pick second. I've kind of had a kiss of death reputation this year in picking MAAC games, and why wouldn't it carry over to my season-long predictions as well? I thought Ryder was going to be really, really solid. Kevin Baggett, as you know, really rarely coaches a bad team. It just doesn't seem to have happened this year. And I know you expected a lot this year too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be one of those Ryder bounces back years. They finished last season. And there were reasons for that. I mean, there was nothing ordinary about last year. They were one of the youngest teams in the country. And then they went out and obviously Dementio Vaughn came back, and he was a guy who's been a first-team All-League player in the MAAC twice. They brought in a guy in Mervyn James, who was an all-league player in the Atlantic Sun at North Alabama as well. So they upgraded in terms of their talent. And I looked at him, I said, they're going to be better. And it just hasn't worked out where they're in the top of the league. They've had spurts where they've looked good. They had a 4-game winning streak earlier this month where they looked like they were starting to put some things together. And then it's kind of like every time, it's like for every step forward, there's 2 steps back. So, okay, here they come. They won 4 straight games. Now they've got 3 straight losses where they've lost those 3 games by a combined 9 points.
Yep.
2 of those games went to overtime, and the game they lost in regulation was by 2 points. So there's been a lot of close games that they've lost, and I think that's really been the thing this year, is that sort of end of game execution where they haven't been able to get over that hump at the end of games.
Why do you think they didn't get off to a great start, though? I mean, the team had a nice core to work with. Again, you're adding Vaughn back in. It seemed like they probably were going to get off to an okay start, and it didn't happen. Why?
Yeah, I just think it was guys trying to figure out what their role was. They lost Terrell Bladen in the offseason to an ACL injury, and that was really big because all of a sudden everybody had to shift another position. The guys are kind of playing out of position. They didn't have a backup 5. So now Mervyn James, who's not really a 5, is got to play small ball 5. They had Nehemiah Benson, a guy who didn't play a whole lot as a freshman, now as a sophomore playing out of position as a small ball 5. So everybody kind of got shuffled into this new role, this new position, because they were missing a guy. And I think that affected them. And it took them some time to figure out, what their role was, where guys fit the best. I look at a guy like Mervyn James. He has really come on in the last month when he's not in foul trouble, which is a huge issue for him. He leads the country in foul outs. But when he is on the floor and he has found the right role, he's a huge positive for Ryder. But early in the year, it just took him time to figure out what the role was. He played a little out of position. So I think that had to do with it. And then, again, it just comes down to your end-of-game execution. They haven't shot the ball well either, at least early in the year. They've done it better the last month, but early in the year, they could not buy a bucket. I went to a game at Bucknell in the non-conference portion of the schedule where they took 80 shots in that game, in a 40-minute game, which is a ridiculous number of shots. And they only shot at about 30%. And, you can't win if you don't make shots. They rank last in the MAAC and made 3-pointers per game. They're 10th in 3-point percentage. So, that's also been, one of their big issues is just being able to make shots. It's not that they're bad looks. It's just they didn't make shots earlier in the year. And it's been better the last, month. They played much better offense. But I think that had a lot to do with the slow start.
Okay. And you think it was the offensive turnaround that led to that 4-game turnaround for them where they were winning? Yeah,
they started to make shots. And also defensively, they were a little more locked in defensively as well. I think he'll tell you, Kevin Baggett will tell you it was their defense. And when they play defense, they play better offense. And I think a lot of teams are like that. When you can get stops, I think that makes your offense go too. I think that those two things kind of work together in that, like, if you're not getting stops, then your offense suffers as well. Because you feel like you've got to go down and you've got to score every single time. Those are the big things. Because if you just watch them play, and if you get a chance to go to the game on Sunday, you'll see the difference in them from the first time they played at Iona. They just got run out of the gym. They had no chance in that game. when these two teams play on Sunday, it's going to be a much more competitive game. I'll go out on a limb and say that. It'll be a much more competitive game than the first one, but you'll see Rider is playing at a higher level. A lot of it is just matters when it comes down to the final 3 minutes of the game, can they make the winning plays? And they haven't done that enough this year.
Okay. So everything's rolling along. They got 4 straight wins. They take on a Siena team that was coming off an Iona win, and I thought Siena was doomed for a fallback game there because the way they celebrated when they beat Iona, you thought they wouldn't have got to the Final Four or something. And then that game was rolling along nicely, and then something happened at the very end of that game that kind of Ryder kind of gave that away. Tell everybody what happened there.
Oh boy, it was a very MAAC game, wasn't it? You know, like
that's a MAAC moment. Yes,
it was a very MAAC moment, and Ryder going, I'm not sure we want to win this. Here, Siena, you take it. And Siena was like, no, it's yours. You guys can have it. And Ryder was like, no, we insist. Let's play 5 more minutes. It was one of those where I've never seen this before, but Ryder, up by 1, comes out of a timeout, right? And gets a violation because they passed the ball out of bounds, right, along the baseline, which you can do if it's after a made basket, except there was a foul in between Siena's made basket. Ryder inbounds it. Siena gives a foul because they had a foul to give. Ryder comes back, and the players forget that you can't pass it along the baseline, so they get a violation. The ball goes back to Siena. Siena then calls a timeout it does not have after the player gets trapped along the sideline, which means Ryder gets 2 free throws and the ball. Ryder then proceeds to hit 1 of 3 free throws. So it's still only a 2-point game. Siena comes down, gets fouled. The kid makes 2 free throws. Ryder misses the shot at the buzzer. It ends up in overtime. And then Siena outscores Ryder 4-3 in overtime, where the kid makes 2 free throws at the end on a questionable foul call. You got all that?
Yeah, that's and just again, like you said, tight losses after that. How much you attribute that to the lack of depth? It looks like Ryder's only playing 8 guys or so regularly. It's really a big part of it down the stretch.
Yeah, it's really only 7 guys.
7.
It's 7. Jeremiah Pope and Nehemiah Benson are really the only 2 guys. There's a little bit of Cedric Altman, who's, came in from Pepperdine, and they had hopes from him that he could be a guy who could defend the other team's best guy and knock down an open shot, but he's been a total zero offensively to the point where they haven't even been able to play him. Corey McKeithen has struggled a little bit learning how to play point guard at the Division I level. He was obviously on the team last year, but he didn't play at all because he had a torn ACL.
Right.
So he went through the rehab process and came back this year. And he's kind of struggled a little bit to learn how to play it at the level. So it's really just a 7-man rotation right now. And one of the things I also want to point out is Ryder has had 3 games this year where it had the ball with a shot and a chance to win at the end of the game. Quinnipiac, Siena, and then at Monmouth the other night, missed all 3. Actually had 2 chances against Siena in that overtime game. Ball in its hands at the end with a chance to win, and it's missed the shot every single time. That kind of defines how their year has gone this year.
Now, I know it was Murray against Monmouth. What about those other 2 games? Was it Murray as well?
Yeah, it was Murray in the regulation against Siena, and he actually had a pretty good look on a mid-range shot that I think if you went back and, you go back and ask him, he should have made that shot against Siena at the end of regulation. And then Jeremiah Pope had a really good look against Quinnipiac at home, and he couldn't knock it down. And then Pope again in the overtime against Siena, not as good a look as he had against Quinnipiac, and he missed it. And then again, this weekend against Manhattan, Ryder up 10 in the second half, gives up that lead. They're down 8 with a minute and a half left. Come back, tie the game, but Mervyn James misses the second of 2 free throws that would have put him up 1. It's kind of the season, right? I said after the game the other day, that Manhattan game was kind of Ryder's season in a nutshell.
Yeah,
right there, close, not able to finish it.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump ahead to the MAAC tournament for a minute. I mean, of course, Baggett has this history of not being able to get out of the quarters. And this seems like the type of team that can win a game, but like you said, because of their depth, because of their inability to make plays late in games, it's hard to see them really making any kind of run. Would you agree?
They could, I don't know, because the MAAC is, I think Iona is the clear favorite. I don't think anybody disagree with that based on what we've seen. But I think 2 through 11 are very even. I'm not sure the seeding even matters unless you were like, I'm desperate to stay away from Iona as long as possible. I'm not sure or you didn't want to play the extra game. 2 through 11, I just think they're so even. Somebody could, I mean, you saw it last year. Fairfield got hot, right? And ended up in the final. No, I know Ryder's track record says they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But is this a team that, could they win 2 games? I mean, they could and end up in the semifinal if the matchups draw their way. Now, I don't think they can beat Iona, but in the MAAC tournament, you only got to beat them once, right? It's not a 7-game series where Iona's going to win in a sweep 4 games to 1. You only got to beat them once in a one-off, and where they have an off night, and you've seen it can happen. Could Ryder do it? Yeah, because they've been in all these games. They're not getting blown out. They're right there. A bounce here, or a bounce there, a play here, a play there. And this Ryder team is 10-6 in the league instead of 6-10.
That's right. Yeah.
But but you also know when it's going against you, right? And you kind of get into bad habits, and you're not doing the right things at the end of the games. Those bounces also go against you.
So let's talk about Iona a bit here. This is an Iona podcast after all. They've obviously had a tremendous season. Better than you expected, about what you expected. What do you think?
Yeah, about what I expected. I thought they were going to be really good. I looked at the players that Rick brought in, and Dally and Joyner are 2 big-time players, particularly in the MAAC. They got Van Eyck back, who came back for the extra year. Slazinski's a nice role player. And then obviously I haven't mentioned Deli Jr. Joseph, who we walked in, and I thought it was a guy who could have been the player of the year in the preseason. I don't know that he's going to be that this year. I'll be interested to see where they kind of rate him, whether he ends up on the first team or the second team. But he was certainly an all-MAAC player. I've said all along, I think he's a Big East player who's in the MAAC. He's so strong. He's got good hands, a nice soft touch around the rim. He can block shots. He's a guy that, really impressed me last season. When I looked at that team, I thought they had a chance in the non-league too to get some nice victories, which they did. They went down to Orlando. It was Orlando, and they picked up the win against Alabama. They had some nice wins against what I thought were other pretty good mid-majors. They beat Hofstra. They beat Yale out of the Ivy League. And I thought those were really good victories as well for them. Obviously, they lost to Belmont, they lost to Kansas. I don't think those don't hurt you at all. Those are all bonus games, right? If you get them, that's just icing on the cake. I think losing the Seton Hall game obviously hurt them.
Yeah.
That was a game that was going to be played locally at the Garden. It would have been a big opportunity for them on national TV to score a big win, a game that I think they would have competed in and given themselves a chance to win. They took the St. Louis game on short notice, as you know. I mean, they get a tough loss at the buzzer where they just couldn't get a shot to go. But I think they did everything you would require of them in the non-conference to at least put themselves in position going into the MAAC season, where if they had a great MAAC season, they could sort of be hanging around that bubble line. Do they have to win the MAAC tournament? I would if I were them. Just I would.
That's kind of how I feel. Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't leave it up to the hands of the committee. They have the losses to Niagara and Siena. That would be my advice. Right. It would behoove Iona to go win the MAAC tournament and make sure it doesn't come down to a committee trying to decide its fate.
Yeah, and I that's kind of how I feel too. I've seen plenty of discussion on it. There are people who still think, you know what, Iona might still be on that bubble, and I'm not a pessimist really, but I don't see it just based on the numbers that I'm looking at. But it's a really bad bubble. They're going to have a shot.
Yeah, and the thing about the MAAC is, as good as Iona is, the MAAC has 20 landmines, right, that you could hit at any time, right? How many teams have we seen go to Buffalo and you run into a night where no matter what Canisius or Niagara's record is, they shoot the lights out, one of those 2 games? I mean, ask that Monmouth team from, that should have made the NCAA tournament that one year, right? They go up to Canisius for the first game of the MAAC season. Canisius shoots the lights out on them, and that's the loss that ends up keeping them out of the tournament. So that's what's tricky about the MAAC, is that every single time you go out to play, right, you go to Buffalo, you go to Poughkeepsie, you got to go to Dratty, you got to come down to Alumni Gym, and you go into these venues that are difficult to win at. When winning road games is hard, you can hit any of those landmines that can blow your season up. And that's the trickiest part is you got to win. First of all, you got to win your home games, right? Take care of business at home, which Iona has done and done convincingly. And then you got to avoid those stumbles on the road. And Iona's hit 2 of them there. Will it come back to haunt them? We'll see. We'll see. But they have a very good team and a team that if Iona is the MAAC representative, can certainly win a game in the NCAA tournament.
Okay. So let's look at Sunday's game between Iona and Rider. Let's picture a scenario where it's tied when under a minute to go. If you're in your mind, if that's what's going on, why? What did Rider do well?
Well, they've defended really well. Iona's not a great 3-point shooting team. I think they're 33% on the year. And they've been able to not get worked over by Nelly Jr. Joseph down low. I mean, he's given Rider all sorts of problems. They don't really have an answer for him inside. But they've defended well against Junior Joseph. They've kept Iona at bay from the 3-point line. And they're in the game. And it also means that Rider's also scored the ball pretty well. Iona's a very good defensive team under Rick Pitino. One of the challenges I think that Rider has is that the guards are small, right? Dwight Murray Jr. is 6 feet tall. Alan Powell, who's had a nice year, though, is 6 feet tall. And sometimes when they face length, which Iona has in guys like Jolly and Jordan and Eric Jane Louis may be my favorite player in the MAAC because he guards the other teams. We don't talk about him all the time. He's not the first guy that you talk about when you think Iona. But he guards the other team's best player every single night, and he loves doing it. And that's why he's might be my favorite player in the MAAC. But I think it means also that Rider, back to the game, I think it means Rider competes better. Rider didn't compete well in that game at Hines. Now, some of that was, look, Rider was playing its 3rd road game that week. The first 2 games were at South Carolina and at Ole Miss. So they were worn down by the time they got to Iona for that MAAC opener. So I think Rider will compete better. Like I said earlier, this game will be much closer than that first one. But if the game, and if it is a tie game with 2 minutes to go, it means that Rider has defended really well and has been able to make some shots offensively that it didn't make in the first game.
All right. And like I said, the MAAC tournament's coming up. We don't want to steal the thunder of the Monmouth podcast guys. We're going to do their huge MAAC tourney preview pod with, I don't know, about 8 or 9 panelists, including both of us. If you had to tell me what you think Rider's going to do. And then also if you had a sleeper that we haven't talked about that you think could make some noise. Again, not knowing seeds or anything. Not knowing seeds or anything. I think could this be the year of all years that Rider wins 2 games and ends up in the semifinals? Could be. It's the MAAC. It would be a MAAC thing.
It would be a very MAAC thing and go right in line with the conference because it was funny. The other day I was talking to somebody and they said, "Oh, what do you think of the game today?" And I said, "Well, I think it could go either way." And they said to me, "You said that last time too." And I said, "Yeah, and I'm going to say that for every one of the next 6 games for the rest of the season that it could go any way." Again, it depends on the matchup. If Rider's in an 8-9 game and they got to play Iona, and you win a game and then you got to play Iona in the quarterfinals, not picking Rider. Nobody's going to pick Rider to win that game. If Rider, and I think they're going to end up playing on Tuesday night. If they're in the 7-10 game, would they win that game and then beat the 2nd seed? They already have wins at St. Peter's, at Siena. They only lost by 2 on the road at Monmouth. Of all the years, could that happen? Yeah, I think it could. Who do I think could be a sleeper? John Dunn's team's playing well again, right? They went through that little lull where they dropped down to the bottom of the league, and everybody's like, "What's going on in Marist?" And they picked it back up. They're starting to string some wins together. They're back in the top 5. They're a team that gave Iona a headache twice this season. You could argue maybe should have won both games. But credit to Iona, which is one of the other things I think Iona does really well, is it makes the winning plays and finds ways to win games like that, where other teams find ways to lose those games. I think Marist could be a real sleeper. I like their guard play with Ricardo Wright, The kid Atuka is going to be the rookie of the year in the league. He's fourth in the league in scoring. He's been really good. And then certainly, the way John Dunn's teams can play defense, I think Marriage could be a real sleeper.
All right. Well, I think we're going to have some fun here the rest of the way. This is the good time of the year. It's everybody's favorite time. The last few games of regular season, conference tournaments, and all that fun stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure you're quite busy as both Rider and Princeton are gearing up. And we'll see you Sunday down in Lawrenceville.
Yeah, I tried to lobby for an Iona-Princeton game when Rick was out there earlier in the year looking for opponents. I went up to the Princeton assistants and I said, hey, Iona's looking for a game there. And they said, well, we played them in the past. But I think Princeton had played its max number of non-league games. We can't do it. I said, because I think that would have just been such a fascinating game. I was probably looking for bigger fish. But I tried to give them a little nudge there. I would have loved to see that game.
Yeah, that would have been a fun one. I mean, of course, Iona already had its quota of Ivy games. They played Yale and Harvard, so
right. They were going for the league. They were going for the league title. They were going.
That's right. They'd make the playoffs in the Ivy League if they were in it. See that?
Yeah, exactly.
2-0. So, Kyle, thank you again for joining. It was awesome having you on. We'll be in touch very soon on the Monmouth podcast for their preview, and we'll see you down in Lawrenceville this weekend.
Sure. Thanks, Guy. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. How about a 22-5 record and a 14-2 record in the conference for our Gales? It's been one heck of a season thus far, but there's still work to be done. And this podcast will be here every step of the way as Iona basketball heads towards marching toward March, in fact. Let's keep it going, Gales, and see you guys along the ride.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com and its publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona College Athletics or the college itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.